You're standing in the open. It's sometime around 10,000 BC. Could be morning, could be afternoon. Honestly, it doesn't matter, because time is about to stop meaning anything. You're somewhere in what we'd eventually call the Middle East, though nobody's called it anything yet. You're holding something. A tool, maybe. A piece of food. It doesn't matter what it is, because in about 3 seconds, you're going to drop it. The ground moves. Not like a rumble you feel in your chest at a concert. Not like a truck passing too close. The ground. The thing that has been the one guaranteed constant of your entire existence. The thing that was there before you were born and will be there after you die. The thing every single action you have ever taken has been premised upon. That thing starts moving sideways. And then it doesn't stop. You don't have a word for this. That's the part we almost never think about. You have words for hunger, for cold, for the specific kind of fear that comes when you spot a predator on the ridge. But this? There is no category for this in your brain. The ground does not move. Except now it does. Except now it is. Except you are watching your world do something your world is not supposed to be able to do. And the part of your mind that handles language and categorization has gone completely, utterly blank. Your body takes over. You don't decide to move, you move. You don't decide to scream. Whatever sound comes out of you is not a decision. The children in your group are crying. Someone older than you, the person who knows everything, the one who has answers, is on their hands and knees in the dirt looking exactly as lost as you feel. That is possibly the most terrifying thing you have seen so far, and the ground is still moving. It lasts maybe 45 seconds. It feels like the entire structure of the universe is being renegotiated. And then, it stops. The dust settles. Something collapsed nearby. A tree fell, or a wall, or a whole section of the hillside just isn't where it was. Your hands are shaking. Everyone around you is breathing hard. Nobody speaks for a long moment because nobody has the words. Here's the question that should be sitting with you right now. What did you just decide that was? What story did your brain reach for to explain something that had no explanation, no precedent, no category? Because ancient humans didn't just feel earthquakes. They had to make meaning out of them. And what they came up with changed everything. Here's what your brain does when it encounters something it has never seen before and has no framework to process. It doesn't give up. It doesn't file the experience under unknown and move on. It reaches hard and fast for the closest thing it already understands. And for a human in 10,000 BC, the closest things it understood were animals, weather, and the intentions of other beings. So the ground shook. Something caused it. And that something, whatever it was alive. This is not primitive stupidity. This is actually a very sophisticated cognitive move. Scientists call it agent detection, the tendency of the human brain to assume that significant events have a cause with intention behind it. We are wired for this. Evolution built it into us because in a world full of actual predators, the cost of assuming something is out to get you when it isn't is much lower than the cost of assuming nothing is out to get you when something very much is. False positives keep you alive. False negatives get you eaten. So the brain defaults to something did this. Something meant this. And once you've decided something meant it, the next question writes itself. What did we do to make it angry? Across ancient cultures on every continent where seismic activity occurred, the explanations that emerged followed this same basic logic with remarkable consistency. In ancient Mesopotamia, earthquakes were the movement of the god Enlil expressing displeasure with humanity's noise and chaos. In parts of ancient Japan, a massive catfish called Namazu lived beneath the earth, pinned down by the god Kashima. When Kashima's attention slipped, Namazu thrashed and the ground above shook. In ancient India, the earth was understood to rest on the back of an elephant, standing on a tortoise, standing on a cobra. When any of them shifted, you felt it. In parts of ancient Greece, Poseidon, god of the sea but also crucially god of earthquakes, would strike the ground with his trident when sufficiently provoked. Different continents, different creatures, different gods, identical logic. Something enormous is underneath us or around us. It is more powerful than we are. It moves when it wants to, and when it moves, we suffer. Therefore, our job is to figure out what it wants and make sure it gets it before next time. That last part matters more than it might seem, because the moment ancient humans decided earthquakes had a cause with intention behind it, they also decided earthquakes were something you could potentially negotiate with. You couldn't negotiate with a random universe, but you could negotiate with a god. You could negotiate with a giant catfish. You could bring offerings. You could change your behavior. You could perform the right ritual at the right time in the right way, and maybe tip the scales in your favor. That instinct, to find the agent, assign the motive, and then try to manage the relationship, is not something we left behind. It's something we built civilization on top of. So the shaking stopped. Now what? This is the part that archaeology actually lets us see. Because unlike beliefs and words and explanations, physical behavior leaves marks. And what the physical record shows us about how ancient humans responded to earthquakes in the immediate aftermath is equal parts fascinating and deeply human. The first thing they did was run. Not randomly, towards specific places. High ground almost universally. Open spaces away from trees and cliff faces. There is archaeological evidence from seismically active regions across the ancient world, suggesting that elevated terrain near settlements showed signs of repeated, sudden occupation. Fire remains, discarded tools, food remnants, in patterns that don't match normal habitation, but match exactly what you'd expect if groups of people were repeatedly fleeing to the same high point in moments of panic, and waiting there until they felt it was safe to return. They had evacuation routes, not written down, not formally designated, but worn into the landscape by repetition and passed down as behavior. Go there. Always go there. The second thing they did was bury things. Or, more precisely, many of them never got the chance to come back and unbury them. Archaeologists excavating sites in earthquake-prone zones, the Mediterranean, Central Asia, parts of the American Southwest, have repeatedly found caches of valuables, tools, food stores, and ritual objects that were clearly hidden deliberately and never retrieved. Not looted. Hidden. The circumstances of the surrounding destruction date to seismic events. What this tells us is that ancient humans, in the seconds or minutes before or during major earthquakes, were making decisions. Grab the children. Hide the things that matter. Get out. These are not the actions of people paralyzed by incomprehension. These are the actions of people executing a plan, however improvised, however terrified. The third thing, and this one is the most quietly remarkable, is that they came back. Almost always they came back. Settlements in seismically active regions show layer after layer of destruction and rebuilding. The same location occupied and reoccupied across centuries despite repeated catastrophic damage. Çatalhöyük in Turkey. Ancient settlements along the Dead Sea Fault. Communities throughout the Aegean. Destroyed and rebuilt. Destroyed and rebuilt. Destroyed and rebuilt. Why would anyone keep living somewhere that keeps trying to kill them? The same reason people live in New Orleans and San Francisco and Tokyo today. Because the land is good, the water is close, the community is there, and humans are extraordinarily stubborn about the places they have decided are home. Some things about us were already completely settled a very long time ago. Here's the part nobody expects. Ancient humans weren't just cowering. They were taking notes. Not literally. There were no notebooks, no seismographs, no academic journals with peer review and a 6-month publication backlog. But there was something that in many ways worked better than all of those things combined for the conditions they were operating in. There was oral tradition. Accumulated, refined, ruthlessly tested knowledge passed from mouth to ear across generations. Kept alive because the people who ignored it died and the people who remembered it didn't. And what they remembered, slowly and painfully and across centuries, was patterns. Certain valleys shook more than others. Certain regions along coastlines experienced the ground moving in ways that inland areas never did. Animals behaved strangely before it happened. Dogs refused to settle, snakes emerged from the ground, fish rose to the surface of lakes in enormous numbers. Wells changed, The water level dropped or turned cloudy or started smelling different days before the earth moved. Springs that had run clear for years suddenly ran muddy with no rain to explain it. We know they noticed these things because they recorded them. Not in the way we record things, but in the way pre-literate cultures always recorded critical survival information. Woven into stories, embedded in behavioral rules, encoded in warnings that sounded like superstition until you understood what they were actually tracking. The ancient Chinese were documenting earthquake precursors as far back as 780 BC, describing unusual animal behavior and well water changes with a specificity that suggests these observations had been accumulating for a long time before anyone wrote them down. In Japan, the cultural knowledge of tsunami behavior, the way the sea pulls back dramatically before a massive wave arrives, was encoded so deeply into coastal communities that there are documented cases of entire villages running for high ground based on that signal alone, saving hundreds of lives. Knowledge that had been passed down through generations from people who had survived exactly this before. In the Mediterranean, ancient builders began doing something remarkable. They started choosing where not to build. Archaeological evidence shows that certain earthquake-prone zones were avoided for settlement in ways that suggest the avoidance was deliberate, that the accumulated memory of destruction in specific locations influenced where the next generation decided to put down roots. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is ancient humans doing exactly what humans do when something keeps happening to them. Paying attention, finding the signal inside the noise, building a model of how the world works, and updating it every time the world proved the model wrong. They didn't have the word seismology. They had something older. They had memory. And in the right hands, across enough generations, memory is a science. The dust settled. The immediate danger passed. The group was alive, mostly, and accounted for, mostly. And now came the part that in some ways required more from them than the earthquake itself had. Now they had to hold the group together. Because here is what a major earthquake does to a community that has no scientific framework for understanding it. It doesn't just destroy buildings. It destroys the basic operating assumption that makes collective life possible. The assumption that the world is stable, that tomorrow will resemble today, that the ground beneath your feet is a fixed and reliable fact. When that assumption breaks, people don't just feel scared. They feel unmoored in a way that is genuinely dangerous to group cohesion. Panic spreads. People make bad decisions. The social fabric, which is already being held together by nothing more substantial than shared belief and mutual trust, starts to fray at exactly the moment when it needs to hold tightest. Ritual was the technology they used to fix this. Not ritual in the vague, hand-wavy way we sometimes use the word. Specific, structured, collective action with a shared purpose that everyone in the group understood and participated in together. Offerings to whatever force had caused this. Ceremonies to demonstrate remorse, or gratitude for survival, or commitment to changed behavior. Communal gathering around fire, the one reliable source of warmth and light and normalcy in a world that had just proven it could stop being normal without any warning at all. Archaeological evidence from post-seismic destruction layers at multiple ancient sites shows something consistent and striking. Ritual deposits, burned offerings, deliberately placed objects, evidence of communal feasting, appearing directly above the debris of earthquake destruction. Not weeks later, not after rebuilding was complete, immediately, before the rubble was fully cleared. The ritual came first because the ritual wasn't optional. It was load-bearing. What those ceremonies actually accomplished, beneath the theological surface, was something modern crisis psychologists would recognize immediately. They gave people something to do. They created a shared narrative that transformed a random, catastrophic event into something with meaning, something that could be responded to, something that implied the possibility of a different outcome next time if the right actions were taken. They synchronized the group emotionally at the exact moment when emotional desynchronization was most dangerous. The shaman or elder leading that post-earthquake ceremony wasn't performing empty superstition. They were doing genuine, skilled, socially critical work. They were taking 30 terrified people standing in the wreckage of everything they knew and giving them back a reason to start rebuilding. That is not nothing. In the right moment, that is everything. Here's where it lands. Here's the part that should actually stay with you. In January 1994, a 6.7 magnitude earthquake hit Northridge, California at 4:30 in the morning. People woke up mid-air. Freeways collapsed. 57 people died. And within hours, tens of thousands of Los Angeles residents were doing something their ancestors would have recognized completely. They were huddled together outside in the dark, not going back inside, watching their homes with a specific kind of distrust they had never felt before. The ground had broken the deal, and some part of their nervous system, ancient and pre-verbal, was not ready to trust it again. Pull out your phone and search Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it this week, for any major earthquake from the last 5 years. What you find in those first minutes after the shaking stops is not chaos. It's something more interesting than chaos. It's people doing exactly 3 things in exactly this order.
First, they say what happened to them personally, in real time, almost involuntarily, because humans have always needed to vocalize a crisis out loud to make it real. Then they ask if everyone else is okay, because the social check-in after a catastrophe is not a modern instinct, it is an ancient one. And then they start trying to explain it, to make meaning out of it, to fit it into a framework that makes the universe feel less arbitrary. The frameworks are different now. We say fault lines instead of Namazu. We say tectonic plates instead of Enlil's anger. We have seismographs and early warning systems and shake alert notifications that can give you a few seconds of warning before the shaking starts, which sounds almost laughably small until you've been in an earthquake and understand exactly how much you can do in 4 seconds when your body already knows what's coming. But here's what hasn't changed at all. The first thing a human does when the ground moves is reach for another human. Every time. Documented across every culture, every century, every magnitude. The instinct to not be alone in this, to confirm that other people felt it too, to pool information and read the faces of the people around you for clues about how scared you should be. That response is as old as the species. Older, probably. Those people in 10,000 BC, hands shaking, standing in the settling dust, looking at each other for answers nobody had. They were doing the same thing the residents of Northridge did at 4:31 in the morning. The same thing you did the last time something shook under your feet, and your first move was to look at whoever was standing next to you. The Earth keeps moving. We keep reaching for each other. 30,000 years of this, at least, and no sign of stopping.